Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to come to this very interesting workshop with a setting, as John said, quite different from what we often are in. And I'll present actually data from one human study, a multi-generation study. The challenges of studying humans, like we have understood from previous presentations, it's that lifespan spans decades, or generations span decades. And it's also a question of statistical modeling, which can be very important to make better use of observational data to draw conclusions about causes. Because we cannot randomize people to start smoking at the age of 13 or not. So it's evidently we need to be able, and there are new developments in statistics that makes it much more possible to try to draw conclusions about the causes of disease. And in this forum, I think we all agree that we are interested in susceptibility windows, the traditional among doctors. So I'm a clinician also, a clinician and a professor of international health. So I'm from a bit different angle, but I'm interested in susceptibility windows. And clinicians will usually think back, I fell and broke a leg, or I smoked for 20 years and I got a disease. Then came the early life origins concept, which have been generally accepted. I think there's been a lot of research and people now agree. Generally, people know that early life is important for your health well. And now we're expanding this lifespan perspective to start before conception. And the point of this, in my eyes, it's the opportunity to do efficient prevention, efficient intervention. If there are these important susceptibility windows, even before conception, it's an added opportunity to improve health in a very efficient manner. And from a global health perspective, with limited resources, if we can place resources like the mother health programs throughout the world, if there are more such phases, that is important to know. So this illustration illustrates a lifespan. Gosh, this was very powerful. I'll just clip it in.
Yeah, there you go.
Here we are. The normal lifespan starts in utero, but we are going before that. And we are interested in susceptibility windows at different time stages through the female and male line. And as John said, in our environment, there has been, for I think 2 decades, focus on mothers smoking, mothers' exposures, and offspring asthma and allergies and lung function, but not on fathers. So the RHINESSA generation study was established to meet this challenge of getting good preconception exposure data. The birth cohorts have usually data on mothers, not so much on fathers, usually little. So we started with established adult cohorts, the ECRHS study and the RHINE studies. These are population-based multi-center studies, each of them about 20,000 adult people born after the Second World War from 1945 to 1970, more or less. And these people, or samples of people, have been followed for about 20 years, and we are now about to do a next follow-up. And during the time these people have been followed and their environment has been very closely registered, they have got a lot of children. So the RHINE cohort has got 27,000 children they have told us something about, and the ECRHS cohort, 11,000 children. And these are the ones we started with, these very well characterized cohorts who have had a lot of children, and then we are investigating their offspring. And that is like a main arm of the RHINESSA study. We're in different age groups. So they're until 50, between 0 and 50 years old, which gives some challenges to the study. We're investigating the grandparents and the fourth generation. And now we have questionnaire data for 12,000 people and data for 2,000, clinical data for 2,000. And then we have registry data in North Europe that are very useful. So the study centers that are doing the studies, it's mostly North Europe, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Estonia, Iceland. Finland wasn't part of this 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and therefore isn't at this moment because we need the parents' data. And then Spain and Australia are contributing with one center, so we're not all totally in North Europe, but they have a different possibility to find their offspring because we can trace them with registry data in an unbiased way. We don't have to ask people about their children because we can find them in the registries. So this is a cohort that have very good information on respiratory health, lung function. Lung function is a very important marker of health, morbidity, much more than blood pressure or cholesterol or many other markers. Lung function really says something about your health. But we do have also information on several other things. We don't have sperm. We are considering. We can, we will do follow-ups and can add information. So the statistical analysis is a particular challenge that I will not explain a lot about. This group in Verona with Simona Cordini and Lucia Calziano are doing fantastic models. They had a 4-year project to develop models to work on multi-generation data. And we hoped they would develop models that I could use, but that is not the conclusion so far. In maybe some years' time, it will be possible, but at the moment, it's still very complex. And this is about what they are doing. They're looking at offspring, fathers, grandparents. This is an example where they consider various variables in the offspring, in the fathers, in the grandparents. Then we have a multi-center study, and we account for that. And fathers may have several siblings, we account for that. And they're building theoretical models that are, now I don't even remember what it's called. I thought it was on this slide. So I can give you that information. But it's very brilliant, and it's causal models. The models are built in a way where you can, of course, with always some carefulness, but draw conclusions about causes. And the reassuring thing is that they get similar results to when I do my simple models. But they can give much more information than that. Okay. So some results. We started first wanting to look at father smoking, and most of the group was not interested because we had been interested in maternal so far. But with the evidence coming from laboratory studies, we thought fathers would be of interest, and we asked a question: does father smoking before conception play a role for offspring asthma? And if yes, which are important? When father started, total years of smoking, numbers of cigarettes daily, or when he quit? And I thought that when he quit would be important, and how many years he had smoked would be important. And we had 27,000 offspring and good smoking data on father. And this is what we found. Father smoking, if he started and quit before conception, an odds ratio of 1.5 about. But through the maternal line, there was no signal. But maybe women don't start smoking early enough to be in pre-puberty. But then fathers smoking, if he starts smoking before the age of 15, we found a 3 times, an odds ratio of 3. So it's a tremendous, suddenly a project from very weak effect, we suddenly get this very striking effect. Fathers starting smoking later and smoking for a lot of years, yes, we did find an effect. Fathers welding, we looked at fathers welding. Because that is also, but it's a chemical and physical exposure. We found an association with fathers welding, odds ratio about 2. Not many fathers started welding before the age of 15, so we didn't study that. And then paternal grandmother smoking, odds ratio of 1.3. So the answer to our question was, the very important thing was when fathers started smoking, pointing to its susceptibility window. But another question, an issue I would like to ask the mechanistic people here, is that when we stratify by father's grandmothers, she did not smoke or she did smoke, paternal grandmother of the offspring, if fathers' mothers smoked or not, then things were completely similar, except this important effect of father smoking before age 15, the odds ratio of 3, was totally wiped out. Well, if father started smoking later, there was no difference whether grandmother smoked or not. And my question was, could there be like a double hit type of mechanism where the grandmother's smoking on the germ cells somehow induce enzymes or something to protect them, or whether the level of damage is reached? I think I have to hurry. So if we very crudely thought of these cells, primordial germ cells, effects in utero before completion of puberty, post-puberty, and we put our findings on human into this cell model on vulnerability windows, we do find an effect, yes, of grandmother smoking, father smoking before completion of puberty, and then father's welding and smoking in the post-puberty phase. And then we wanted to investigate particularly this time window of puberty in a different cohort, the ECRHS study, and with these very complex models, finding these estimates in the paternal line, but by accounting for everything in these models, they find that fathers smoking during early adolescence and also grandmothers and mothers smoking during pregnancy were independently related to asthma in the offspring. So they conclude that risk factors for asthma should be sought in both parents and before conception. They could not find a significant effect of the paternal grandmother, but there were much fewer children. I have 2 more slides on findings where we confirm just the same message. A new analysis of RHINESSA ECRHS cohort looking at lung function in offspring confirms effect of fathers smoking before age 15 on FEV1 and FVC, which are 2 very important lung function measures, and both were lower in persons whose father had started smoking early. And there was a grandmother effect that was direct. Then in a very different cohort from Health Survey of England, which have data on non-biological and biological offspring, they tested the same, or we did, finding that if mother smoked around the time of birth, there was an increased risk for asthma in her offspring if it was she was the biological parent and not if she was not the biological parent. So which is what we think we know. And you see the estimate is tiny, 1.21. It's a huge cohort with very crude data. About fathers smoking only prior to conception, there is a similarly increased risk as mother smoking. And if they try to look at when fathers starting to smoke, it was starting between age 8 to 14. So in a very different type of setting, asking the same question, this vulnerability window in pre-puberty in males appeared to be important. So summarizing, we find in each of these various cohorts, we do find surprisingly consistent data that fathers starting smoking early may be of importance. And some of these are causal models. It starts, I think this is fairly good documentation. So we have looked at also snus, snuff, oral moist tobacco, and we do see a similar thing. Starting early with snus is related, we haven't published yet, it's not finished at all, the analysis, but preliminary data shows that. We have just published an analysis, not looking at fathers smoking, but fathers' onset of overweight between childhood and puberty, showing a strong effect on asthma. And we are also now trying to look at other outcomes than of fathers' early smoking on offspring health. And it's strikingly consistent. So if we get back to this slide, I think this is a very well-known vulnerability window of importance. There are some studies showing grandmother as a these effect, not so much through the paternal line. There's very little information, but it's likely that these are important vulnerability windows, not only for one generation. But my main interest now is this time window in young men, or pre-puberty, puberty boys. And I think the public health implications are enormous. Let's say that moving resources to women and children, pregnant women and children, have been very important in a public health perspective. We should not take those resources away. But then in addition, moving resources to pre-puberty would be can be of very large importance. Thank you. And again, this opportunity, it's an opportunity. It's not a horrible thing that what we do is important for generations. It's an opportunity to do something. It's a societal responsibility. It's not to pull ourselves up by the hair. We have that impression in Norway. It's not that I should do everything to look after my children. It's a society, how to do something to look after our young people. And thank you to a lot of people who have contributed to this. Thank you.
That was spectacular. Yeah. By the way, our lunch is going to be ready in about 10 minutes, and we could go a little bit into that.
All the talks have been so amazing. Thank you for that one. Really, really fascinating. This early onset problem, happening when you start these kinds of things when you're young, 15 years old, the males. It strikes me immediately right now, the vaping crisis that we're undergoing in the United States and Canada and probably all over the world, where the biggest problem is the teenagers in the high schools, they're having to take the bathroom doors off now because they have to monitor the kids. They're vaping so much. So these kinds of data need to get out there. We need to really think about these early life stage susceptibilities, and we don't do a good enough job at that. So I guess it's just a comment that, I'm so glad that you're looking at this and clearly demonstrates we need to look much more deeply into that.
Yeah, and I think as a pulmonologist, and we have worked on cleaning agents, cleaning sprays, and of course, these agents are not meant for the lining of your lungs. But the vaping thing, there are no chemical substances that would be meant for the lining of your lungs, except asthma medication if you're sick. It's evidently bad. It must be.
Excuse me. Before I go to Jill, I would like to ask a quick question. So your data on snuff or snus.
Yeah.
So that's a complex mixture also, but it does not have the combustion products. The products of combustion of cigarettes. And that does begin to suggest that it is the nicotine itself that actually may be a critical component of the cigarette smoke here. So I'm just raising the issue.
That nicotine is one of the important components. And John, you showed some research of showing nicotine effects across generations. On ADHS, you showed nicotine. And there is nicotine receptors on sperm cells, I have learned. Nicotine-like, or it can't be directly, but yeah. Sorry.
So, of course, I'm interested in multiple endpoints, not just the asthma and allergy endpoints. And these cohorts, particularly those in the Northern European countries with the registers, seem to present an opportunity to look at other endpoints in the offspring of the exposed germ cells. So, of course, I'm interested in ADHD, autism, neurodevelopmental outcomes. I realize you're a pulmonologist, not a neurobiologist, but I do wonder, I'm asking out loud to the gods, like if there are opportunities to include other disease and disorder endpoints in these sorts of studies.
Because I think we can include now, so there are two possible options. One is using registry data. I think we'll do both. And then we will do follow-ups of the cohorts. So we do have a hospital anxiety and depression scale, I think in some, and we have quality of life, but not much. But we can add 2 questionnaires. I was thinking about ADHD. There must be standardized questionnaires that are not very long that we can include. But anything treated by medication, we can have prescription data. So we are now merging with prescription registries for all 4 generations. So we can have something on exposure, but mostly on outcomes. So we can certainly have multiple outcomes.
So you mentioned that non-biological offspring are insensitive to parental smoking, yes? Non-biological offspring are not affected.
No.
But we know that second-hand smoking is harmful.
Yes. And
So my question is, can you stratify non-biological smoking group by age at what they were adopted and to see if there is difference?
they don't have that amount of data in this survey. And what I think, with asthma, the meta-analysis suggested an effect of paternal smoking, and we always thought it was passive smoking. But looking into this, I believe the preconception is much more important. Not saying that passive exposure is not important, but probably it's a much weaker effect. Much less exposure maybe, and exposure in less vulnerable periods. But it's true, we are seeing, I have been in a way surprised that there is so little effect of post-natal exposure. So in my head now, everything we've been seeing earlier on father smoking, I think is mostly preconception effects.
Thank you.
I want to say there has come a study showing that in Europe smoking is increasing between age 11 and 15. Did you show that? I don't think you did, John. No, because there is a recent publication showing that while the smoking policies have been extremely successful in having people stopping smoking, except age group 10 to 15, which are actually a group which is increasing. So the name Marcon is showing, has a study showing that this last year.
And of course, there was a new study just reported a day or 2 days ago here in the United States showing middle school children, so this is ages, 12, 13, 14 ages, as many as almost 24, 25% are now vaping. So they're getting a nicotine exposure at that age. It's unbelievable. So.